Hey, what's up? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have a very exciting video planned, and that is a Riley Sager reading guide. Because I've been wanting to make a reading guide for Riley Sager for a very long time, but I wanted to wait until after his 5th book was published, which just came out in the month of July. It's called Survive the Night. And so I thought now that he has 5 books, it would be fun to make a video that's kind of like a reading guide. Each of his 5 books and what they're about. If you've never read a Riley Sager, you will get to know a little bit about each book. I will let you know the general ratings for each book. I will be ranking them as like which one's my favorite. I'll be letting you know which ones you should start with. I'll be recommending you other books that are kind of similar to Riley Sager's books, like different authors, and also movie and TV show comparisons to his books. I'll be letting you know about the common tropes in each one of his books and ranking them which one I think is the most scary. And I'll also be choosing one Taylor Swift song that I think matches each one of his books best, because why not? I'll be putting timestamps down below if you want to jump around and see different things in this video, but let's just jump right into it. So as I said before, Riley Sager has published 5 books so far. His first book was published in July 2017, so he has had a book every single year for the last 5 years. His first book is Final Girls, and this book averages a 3.83 out of 5 on Goodreads, so this is one of his lower rated novels. This is also the one that I read the longest time ago and I have the most fuzzy memory on, but basically this book follows this college student named Quincy. 10 years ago she went on this vacation with 5 of her friends, and all 5 of them were brutally murdered, and she was the final girl, like the only survivor. And then she gets known to be a part of this other group of girls that are also the only sole survivors of these mass murders that they've experienced. And now, you know, she's doing pretty okay. She has this guy that's almost her fiance named Jeff. She has this popular baking blog and a beautiful apartment. And then one of the other final girls, Lisa, turns up dead. And then the other final girl, Sam, shows up on her doorstep and she's like, "We're being targeted." And this book is mostly all told from Quincy's point of view. We do get some chapters, though, that jump back and forth to the night that all of her friends' murders happened at Pine Cottage. But for the most part, it's a pretty straightforward first-person point of view. We're just following Quincy on her journey to trying to figure out what really happened to her and what's happening now. And then next up we have The Last Time I Lied. This book published in July 2018, and this one averages a 4.06 on Goodreads out of 5. This one is about a young woman who returns to her childhood summer camp to uncover the truth about a tragedy that happened there 15 years ago. So we're following this woman named Emma, who's an artist. She's a painter, and 15 years ago she went to this Camp Nightingale with these other 3 girls who went missing at this camp, and then the camp had to close after that because these 3 girls went missing. It was very mysterious, suspicious circumstances. And now 15 years later they ask her if she wants to be a camp counselor at this camp for the reopening of the camp, and she decides that she wants to go back because she wants to find out what really happened to her 3 friends. She gets assigned to sleep in the same cabin that she slept in when she was a teenager. And this book is Riley Sager's take on like a summer campy mystery murder spooky vibes. And this book, as far as the timeline goes, we are only following Emma's point of view in this book, but we are once again jumping back and forth in time in the present day and then 15 years ago when she was a teenager at this camp. And then we have his 3rd novel, Lock Every Door. This book published in July of 2019. And this book averages a 3.91 on Goodreads. And I also wanted to mention it's his only book that has more than 100,000 reviews. So it's his most read book so far. And in this book, we're following this woman named Jules who gets the opportunity to get paid to live in this New York City apartment called the Bartholomew. It's in this building, and they're gonna pay her $4,000 a month to live there, but they have all these freaky rules, like you can't have any guests here and you have to stay the night in this apartment. And it's very strange because there's all these freaky rules, and she doesn't know maybe this apartment building is haunted because all these like weird creepy things are happening in her building that she can't explain. And she finds out that the woman who was staying in this exact apartment before her went missing recently. This book is probably his most easy to read thriller in my opinion, just because the timeline is the most linear of all of his books. We only follow from Jules' point of view in this book, so there's no multiple point of views, and we only get a glimpse into the future in the prologue of the book. Like, we kind of find out what's happening at the end, and then it jumps into like 6 days ago, 5 days ago, and we just kind of follow the events leading up to the very end of this book. So there's not too much time jumping, nothing like that. It's pretty straightforward, and this book has immaculate vibes of this spooky ass apartment building in New York City. And then next up we have Home Before Dark. This is his 4th published novel. This one came out in June of 2020. This one averages a 4.09 on Goodreads, which is actually his highest rated book on Goodreads. And in this story, we're following this girl named Maggie, and her father has written this book called House of Horrors, which is supposed to be this like true novel that he wrote about the house that their family grew up in and how the house was haunted. And now Maggie is an adult, and her father has recently passed away, and he left her the house that the book was written about. And so she decides to go back to the house to start clearing stuff out, and she finds herself not really knowing if what happened was actually real or not, and then some spooky shit starts happening to her as an adult. And this book, the timeline is really interesting because we get Maggie's point of view as an adult, but then in alternate chapters we get to read her dad's book called House of Horrors, and we get to kind of read about her childhood and what happened to her when she lived in this house. This is definitely Riley Sager's book that feels the most horror vibes out of all of them, just because of the haunted house story. It has some paranormal things happening in this book. And then we have his most recently published novel, Survive the Night. This one just came out in June 2021. Survive the Night averages a 3.63 on Goodreads, which is technically his lowest rated book so far, but also this book is his newest book, so it has the most fluctuating rating out of them all. But it just keeps getting lower and lower every time that I've checked it. And this book takes place in November 1991. We're following this woman, Charlie, who gets in the car with this man who she doesn't know named Josh, and he's going to be giving her a ride, but the longer that she's in the car with him, the more she starts to grow suspicious of him and thinks he could possibly be the campus killer that's been going around her college campus. There's a serial killer on the loose, and now she's starting to think that maybe Josh is the serial killer. This entire book is very claustrophobic. Most of this book does take place in the car, just with her and Josh. And in this book, we actually do get multiple different points of view. It's mostly told from Charlie's point of view, but every now and then we do get a chapter from some of the other characters in this book, which was definitely a choice. This book is kind of like Lock Every Door in the sense that we're mostly getting a linear timeline, like we're not jumping back and forth in time too much. It's all pretty straightforward. It all takes place on the one night in this car. It's about surviving the night. So yeah, these are the 5 novels that Riley Sager has published this far. Some very common tropes with this author is that he always writes from a female protagonist. All 5 of his books have female protagonists, and it usually always involves the female protagonist trusting a shady man for whatever reason. I never really had an issue with the way that Riley writes female protagonists. I know some people criticize him for this and say that he writes females that are unrealistic or unbelievable, and I personally never had an issue with the way that he wrote female characters until his most recent book, Survive the Night. This is the first one that kind of irked me with how the female was written, just because it seemed so unrealistic to me. But with all of his other books, I never really had a problem with the way that he wrote female characters. I feel like Riley Sager's kind of known for the double plot twist, as I like to call it, because his books are really known for having really great plot twists at the end of his books, but then he usually has another plot twist on top of that one that you don't see coming. So it's like, even if you did predict one of the plot twists, there's usually a second one coming that you probably didn't predict. And I really love that because it always makes me look forward to reading his books because I know his endings are going to be clever. In most of his books, there is like a girl gone missing trope. Not all of them, but in most of his books there is this trope, and that's a trope that I really enjoy in mysteries. I really like when people go missing and we try to figure out what happened to them. He also does commonly do the unreliable narrator trope, and that is especially present in Survive the Night and The Last Time I Lied, and a little bit in Final Girls, and that's usually because of the main characters using some kind of medication. And he is also known for having some thrillers that feel very like spooky or paranormal vibes or even like horror vibes, and that is present in The Last Time I Lied, Home Before Dark, and Lock Every Door. These are the ones that feel the most creepy and spooky to me out of his thrillers. I mean, Final Girls also does have that horror vibe in the sense that we're following like Final Girls, you know, it feels more like a slasher, but these ones feel more like paranormal vibes. So now I'll be ranking them by favorite to least favorite. If you watch my channel often, you probably already know which ones are my favorites, but but I'll start with my very favorite, which is Lock Every Door. This one is still by far my favorite Riley Sager novel. There's just something about this book that I just genuinely love. I do think it's like the creepy apartment building atmosphere in New York City that I eat this shit up. And I've read this book twice now. I just really enjoy it. I know Jules is kind of a frustrating protagonist at times, like I do understand that, but also I was just really invested. I wanted to know what happened to this other girl in this building before she went missing, like what was going on. And I do think the plot twist at the end of this book is just so shocking and just so worth the experience of reading this book. My second favorite has got to be Home Before Dark. This one's actually a very close second because I really, really love this book. This is just my favorite. You know, it has the most like Haunting of Hill House vibes. I really love the spooky shit in this book. There were so many scenes in this book that actually gave me chills, that like scared me. And I feel like that's so awesome. It also is a really good thriller. Like it has some really good twists at the end that I did not see coming. And this is one that I would highly recommend to anybody looking to get into Riley Sager. Third place, I have The Last Time I Lied. This one is also really, really great in the spooky atmosphere. I mean, of course, my top three are the ones that have the spooky paranormal vibes, you know, it makes sense. And I absolutely live for the summer vibes in this book. There's so much like camp vibes, lake vibes, and then there's also this paranormal aspect to it brimming under the surface. It's not like a main thing in the story, but it's just there. I also love the way that they play two truths and a lie in this game and how that kind of plays into the unreliable narrator aspect of this book. It's just really interesting, really well thought out. I've actually read this book twice, and on my second reading of it, I was mind blown again by one of the plot twists that I completely forgot about. And it's just such a clever book, and this ending makes me think for so long. Like, it's such a clever ending. My fourth favorite is Final Girls. This one is honestly one that I don't remember very well, but I'm honestly not a huge fan of slasher stories to begin with. But I was a huge fan of Quincy's relationship with the other final girl in this book. I just thought they had a really interesting connection, and I was surprised by the plot twist at the end of this book. I mean, it's been a couple of years since I read it, but I still remember being shocked, and I still remember what the plot twist was. And this one was my least favorite until I read Survive the Night, which is his newest release, which this is unfortunate that this one is my least favorite. But even still, it's not like I didn't enjoy this book. It was about a 3-star for me. Like, I didn't hate it, but it was just my least favorite because this is the one that I found to be the most frustrating to read personally, because Charlie was a really difficult protagonist. You know, she was hard to root for because she was just so frustrating. You know, she ignored every single red flag. But I do think this book has an audience, and I do think that there will be people out there who will really enjoy this book. I just think this concept would work better as a movie, in my personal opinion. But something I really did love about this book is Charlie's obsession with film and movies. That was something that made her super relatable to me. And I also loved the 90s nostalgia in this. Like my friend Mike said, if this ever got adapted into a film, at least we know it would have a great soundtrack. So yeah, now to rank them in order of which I personally think is the most scary. I mean, I would have to say Home Before Dark, I personally think is his most scary book out of all of them, just because this one really does dive into the horror aspects of this book. We basically get like a mini horror novel within this thriller novel because we get her dad's, you know, House of Horrors book in this book. And this is the only Riley Sager book that includes that trope of a book within a book, which is something that I also really enjoy, by the way. But this book, you know, the House of Horrors book, is absolutely terrifying, and there are just things in this book, like some imagery that I can't get out of my head that's just really spooky and really well done. And I loved it. Like, you know, like I said, it's the most Haunting of Hill House vibes, and Haunting of Hill House is scary. I think the second most scary is Lock Every Door, because like I said, this one kind of has this is it haunted kind of apartment building vibes. And so there's just some really spooky moments in this book that are just really chilling, you know? It's just like she hears something that's not there, like there's a creak, or she thinks somebody's watching her. It's just spooky. And we have The Last Time I Lied, and this one is because, you know, there's like this cabin in the middle of the woods and it's like the summertime, but this one definitely has some spooky moments. There's also this story about this lake in this book. I'm not gonna get into it because it's kind of spoilery, but that whole story freaked me out in this book. It was like a paranormal spooky aspect of the book that I really enjoyed. And then I would say Final Girls is only scary in the sense of like a slasher, so like if you're scared of the idea of like slasher stories, then this one might kind of be scary, but I personally didn't find this one very scary at all. And then Survive the Night, I did not find this book scary whatsoever. I would say this is a 0 on the scariness. So the question is, what book should you start with? If you're just looking to get into Riley Sager, what book do I personally think you should start with? I mean, with any authors like this, if you're looking to get into more of Riley Sager's work, I think starting in publication publication order maybe would be the way to go, you know, because his books are only going to improve as you go, hopefully. So I think if you're interested in slashers, I would recommend starting with Final Girls, but you know, like I said, I'm not really interested in slashers, so if you're like me and you don't really want to read a slasher, then I would definitely recommend starting with Lock Every Door or Home Before Dark, but especially Lock Every Door, because not only because Lock Every Door is my favorite, so I think it's the one that you should read if you're going to read any of these, but also because Lock Every Door is the most easiest to read, if that makes sense, because of the timeline. Like, it's just not confusing in any way, you know, like anybody could read this and it's really straightforward and it's really easy to grasp, whereas some of his other books are a little bit more complex, like Home Before Dark, where there's multiple timelines happening, and so you kind of have to keep track of both. But either way, I think these books are his most fun, best books to get you into Riley Sager. Like, if you read one of these and you don't vibe with it, then you might not vibe with any of his books. But honestly, now that you know what each book is about and you know which ones my personal favorites are, you can start with whichever one sounds the most interesting to you and just see if he is your thing or not. Something I do appreciate about Riley Sager's books is that they're so easy to read. He has short chapters and you just fly through his books. Like, it never takes me longer than like 1 or 2 sittings at the most to get through one of his books, just because I need to know what is happening, and they're all just very readable. So next up, if I had to choose a Taylor Swift song to go with every Riley Sager book, these would be the ones that I would choose. And I'm only doing this for fun because, you know, Riley Sager is actually a huge Swiftie. He's like a pretty big Taylor Swift fan, which is just amazing, and it honestly just makes me a bigger fan of him. If you go and check out his Instagram and his Twitter, he's always posting about Taylor and talking about her new albums, and just like, he's so adorable. He's such a Swiftie. So I thought Riley might appreciate if I did this, you know, picked some Taylor Swift songs that match his books. And this is all just for fun and games, you know, like these books, the lyrics don't really match the books that well, but the vibes, you know, the vibes of these songs match these books in my opinion. So for Survive the Night, I chose Getaway Car. I'm sorry, that song fits so well. I can't, it's perfect. Should've known I'd be the first to leave it. Think about the place where you first met me. Nothing good starts in a getaway car. Ugh, it's perfect. And then for Home Before Dark, I chose Haunted, because I've got jokes. For Lock Every Door, I chose Look What You Made Me Do. Look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. And for The Last Time I Lied, I chose I Did Something Bad. They say I did something bad. And was this so good? And then lastly, for Final Girls, I chose Bad Blood. Oh my gosh. You literally can't make this shit up. You made a deep cut and now we got Bad Blood. Okay, anyways, on to the next. So the next thing is going to be, if you have read Riley Sager, what are some authors that I think you would also enjoy their books? I would highly recommend checking out Alex Michaelides. I just feel like he also has a very similar vibe with his thrillers, just in the sense that they're really well written, they're really fun, and they have really good plot twists. He's one of my other favorite authors, along with Riley Sager. Like, I just always really enjoy his thrillers. These are the only 2 he has out so far, and I've loved them both. I would also recommend checking out Peter Swanson, just because his books are also very readable and very easy to read in my opinion. He has also kind of like blockbuster vibes kind of thrillers. I don't know if that makes sense. But even though I don't always enjoy his books, like this one, I didn't really enjoy it, but I can also see Riley Sager fans enjoying these books. I think Peter Swanson's best book is The Kind Worth Killing, but I do think all of his books are, you know, worth reading. They're really fun thrillers. And then also, I know Grady Hendrix is a horror author, but I feel like if you enjoy Riley Sager, you might want to check out Grady Hendrix, just because his books are more on the fun side with horror, at least in my opinion. I know Grady Hendrix has that new book, you know, the Final Girl support group, that a lot of people are comparing to Final Girls. So I do think like Grady Hendrix does have a very similar style to Riley Sager, and his books are just more on the horror side and less on the thriller side, but also still very fun. And of course, you know, like Ruth Ware is another super popular thriller author that I feel like you would probably enjoy Ruth Ware's books if you enjoy Riley Sager's books, but I personally would only recommend The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. All of the other books I have read by her have been pretty disappointing, at least for me personally. but I love The Turn of the Key, one of my all-time favorites. And then lastly, this last little section of the video is going to be if you enjoyed this book, then I recommend either this other book or this movie or this TV show that's similar in vibes. Like for Final Girls, I think if you enjoyed Final Girls, you should probably check out the Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. Like I just said, they're very similar in vibes in the sense that they both follow this group of final girls who are all the only survivors of their own massacres, and then they're being targeted again and killed because they're final girls. It's just, you know, they're similar. And then I would say if you enjoyed The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager, I would definitely recommend checking out American Horror Story, the 1984 season specifically, because that season also has major camp vibes and it just feels very similar to this. And then if you enjoyed Lock Every Door, I would highly recommend The Turn of the Key, because both of these books kind of have this similar atmosphere of like maybe this place is haunted and it's spooky, and I just feel like they're both very similar in vibes. They came out around the same time, so they just remind me a lot of each other. And then I think if you like Home Before Dark, as I've mentioned earlier in this video, you should check out The Haunting of Hill House, and I specifically mean the TV show, not so much the book, but I haven't read the book personally, so I don't really know. But I found this to be so similar. I feel like the House of Horrors book in this book is inspired by The Haunting of Hill House. Like it has to be, you know, it's just, there's so many similarities, it's amazing. And then lastly, if you enjoyed Survive the Night, I would highly recommend checking out the book and the movie I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This book reminded me so much of this movie while I was reading this book. It was insane because there's a lot of claustrophobic moments when they're in the car in both of these stories, and there's just a lot of similarities that I can't spoil for you, but there are. And then I also think Survive the Night is kind of similar to No Exit, but I would actually recommend No Exit over Survive the Night. This is another like claustrophobic story that all takes place in one night, and it's very intense. Right, so that concludes my Riley Sager reading guide. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know what are your favorite Riley Sager books and what are some other books that you like to compare his books to, and let me know what is your most favorite and most disappointing Riley Sager novel. And if you'd like to see me do this for any other authors that you enjoy, then please let me know who you would like to see them for. I know I would definitely like to do a video like this for Taylor Jenkins Reid coming up in the future, because she is one of my favorite, if not my favorite author. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know all your thoughts down below, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye. Tried to write me off. Remember when you thought I'd take a loss? Look what you just made me do. Look what you just made me. It just feels so good. See you remember? Oh wait, you got amnesia. Blue stab in the back, fire jumping through. Look what you just made me do. Look what you just made me do.